Good morning, ladies and coronavirus germs. This is the Ticker Guy on the 24th. Hey, who was paying attention to the supposed presser last night? That was kind of interesting to see the Donald go off on Georgia's governor. It's the second day in a row, of course, he's done that. And there are now back-channel reports coming out in the press that, in fact, he approved of what Kemp was going to do right up until after he did it and was committed, and then went back to him and said, oh, no. Fauci and Birx don't like it. This is dangerous. And Kemp basically told him pound sand, that he'd already made his public statement, he'd made his decision, and he was sticking with it. And so now we've had 2 days of Trump basically saying that, the man's a goof and, things like this. You have to remember that there is some bad blood here between the two of them, in that Kemp made an appointment to the Senate that Trump did not like. He bypassed the person he wanted to have that seat, so that the Donald would turn around and stab him in the back is not an unreasonable belief at all. In fact, I'd be very shocked if that's not exactly what happened. So we need to be a little careful here with trying to ascribe one thing or another to this, because I'm not at all sure exactly what went on. But I would not believe for a minute that Trump is in any way innocent in this and Kemp is a bad guy. In fact, I suspect that exactly the opposite is the case, that what probably happened here is that there was a little retribution game being played. In fact, if that's not the case, I'll be shocked. So, folks, be cautious believing any of the BS that you hear coming from these people at this point in time. I'm just not. Okay, let's go on a little bit. Yesterday, there was a big dump in the market in the afternoon when Gilead's remdesivir had a very poor showing early report out. Gilead tried to spin it and put a pleasant face on it. The fact of the matter is that this was not a drug that was really targeted this way. They retargeted it and, hey, we think it'll work, and maybe not. There's a general problem that's going on right now with all of these drugs, and this extends to the hydroxychloroquine trial within the VA as well, and that is that they're giving them to people that are critically ill. That's crazy. Okay, anyone that has paid any attention to viruses knows. See, the same thing. I mean, if you've ever gotten the flu and you're going to the doc and they give you a Tamiflu prescription, it's the same deal. You have to take it within a couple of days of the onset of symptoms, or it's pointless. If you wait until the infection really gets going, you're wasting your time, because your body has already started to fight off the virus, and as a result, the viral load has probably reached its maximum. And once that's happened, anything that inhibits replication of viruses doesn't do any good. And now it's simply a question of whether or not your body manages to fight off the effects, or whether the effects kill you. But the idea of actually interrupting that process is no longer possible, because it's already happened. And there's a lot of stupidity going on within the medical system when it comes to this. The other thing that's interesting is that we had another piece of documentation that came out yesterday that, in fact, ventilators are basically worthless. This, again, goes to one of my central points, which is that the idea that we have a primary overload problem within the healthcare system, and that justifies these lockdowns and actions taken, is just ludicrous, because the entire point of this exercise needs to be to keep people away from ventilators and invasive procedures. If you don't need an invasive procedure, you don't need a hospital. If you do need an invasive procedure, you do need a hospital. However, if the invasive procedure is very likely to kill you, then it makes absolutely no difference. And as a result, the entire model that we have for dealing with diseases like this is just plain old-fashioned broken. What we need is a sanitarian type of model, where you have, those are the only places that people with this disease go. A ordinary hospital is not to be used for that, and you essentially gatekeep the hospitals in such a way that people that are COVID positive cannot go in there. If you have to test everybody that's in the hospital every single day, and you have to keep the ordinary people, they're the only ones who are allowed in. People with COVID have to go to a specific facility then that's the way you got to do it. It's the only way you can keep the hospitals from becoming vectors. And that is extremely important, and it's something that we've totally ignored, just like we've ignored locking in the nursing homes and the other extended care facilities, which, again, would have been the intelligent thing to do straight up front. We knew this after Kirkland. Nobody wants to take on the tough calls. Nobody. We're not getting it from any of the politicians. We're not getting it from any of the people that have a brain in their head. And in addition, the evidence continues to pile up that this bug is in the realm of a flu in terms of lethality. Now, that's just not to say it isn't a bad bug. It is a bad bug. That's not to say that it doesn't occasionally get people who don't have crazy other lists of comorbidities. It does every now and then get some people in that situation. But it is to say that this is not a bug that comes through and ravages people on an indiscriminate basis. It's not something like SARS that kills 15% of the people get it, and 50% of those over 65. Okay, I mean that kind of thing is terrible. It is more along the realm of the sort of flu that went through the United States in the late 1960s. And that's, I was a child at the time, so I don't remember much of it. I probably got it and probably got sicker than a dog because, that did happen. And I do remember being really badly sick a couple of times with the flu when I was a kid. And one of them might have been that one. Of course, I didn't know what a pandemic was or an epidemic or, I was just too young to comprehend it at an intellectual kind of level. And yet I do remember going to the doctor's office a couple of times because I remember the office. And it's kind of funny what you remember when you're really young. But I remember the office and remember going a couple of times and being just nastily ill. Okay. And pediatric office that I used to go to had two sides of the waiting room, one for sick people and one for people that weren't, for the ordinary, kid stuff, immunizations or whatever have you. And so, there you go. And during my childhood, I only made a couple of visits to the sick side, but one of them may have been for that flu. You never know. So anyway, something to think about, but we're not putting any kind of effort into that at all. None, zero. CNN, by the way, is still running their BS about this being a racist thing. And oh, by the way, we have this terrible problem in the black population because racism. No, we have this terrible problem in the black population because black people are inculcated to not give a blankety blank about what goes down their pie hole. And then you got this guy pontificating this morning about how we ought to be eating a vegan diet. Oh, what a load of bull. First off, if you want to have all sorts of problems with deficiencies nutritionally and everything else, and then have this great incentive because you have a carb-heavy diet, that by God, I'm hungry all the time, and so what am I going to do? Well, the easiest thing to do is grab a bag of Doritos. That's a great way to do it. Now, can you, through extraordinary willpower, attempt to overcome that? Sure. Why do you want to go that much trouble? Why don't you eat your bacon and eggs? And do it at 11 in the morning, okay? And, do the keto thing. Look, folks, it's a heck of a lot easier, all right? And you can look at the results. I've posted them many times. You can argue with the results if you want, but, go ahead and try, all right? The reality is that I'm a middle-aged man getting towards an old-age man. By the way, supposedly there's a survey out that says if you're 57-year-old, so that means I'm about to be there. And, well, hey, I do have gray hair. And oh, by the way, for those who say that you won't stick with it and it doesn't work and da-da-da-da, well, that's a bunch of bull. I'm sitting here recording this morning. I'm having my coffee, and I am unlikely to want anything to eat until about noon. And that's just the way it usually goes for most days. I'm just not hungry until then, and so why would I eat anything? I mean, if you're not hungry, why would you eat? Well, that... there goes the problem right there, right? And folks, I do remember the mornings that I would wake up ravenously hungry and I wanted some waffles or whatever have you. So, not no more. Not no more. So, yeah, is Trump going to do anything intelligent about this with the lockdowns and lifting them? No, and in fact, there is now rumor floating around that he's actually going to turn around and extend the 30 days to slow the spread thing, which means it won't be 30 days again. Okay, again, we've already had him lie twice, folks. At some point, okay, and I think you have to wonder if the guy's actually trying to lose at this point. I think Trump believes that if he gets through this thing somehow and gets into the summer months, and sunlight and heat attenuate the virus's transmission during the summer months. That's actually listening to him yesterday was laughable. But the reality is that we know that viruses are rapidly destroyed by UV. Okay, and so the idea that airborne transmission is going to go on a regular basis between people that are outside in the sun is just a bunch of BS. It's not going to in any kind of a concerted basis. And why not? Because that's just the way it is. It's been that way for every virus ever. It's nothing new, and it's not surprising. It's one of the reasons that respiratory viruses like the flu don't do so well in the summertime, because people are outdoors. The virus is rapidly destroyed within seconds to minutes in aerosols that drift around outside. Plus, you have this thing called wind, which disperses them very rapidly. And so between those two things, it's very hard to get enough viral load to transmit from one person to another in an outdoor, open-air environment. It's just very difficult. It's not impossible. Now, something that's spread through fecal-oral is a different story entirely, because if it's on your hands and it doesn't get exposed to sunlight immediately, or if you're inside, now you've got another problem. Okay, and so there's two different aspects of this. This, by the way, is probably one of the reasons that India, although they've had problems with transmission, have not gotten pounded, because even though they have a lot of people crap outside, the fact is it's outdoors. If they were doing the outhouse thing, and they're not, if they were doing the outhouse thing, it would probably be a horrid problem. A la pit toilets, okay, like you have, floor squat toilets in the floor, like you have throughout a lot of Asia. But in India, a lot of people actually take a dump outdoors. Now, that's a terrible thing for some diseases, anything that's waterborne, but not so much for something like this that is, because let's face it, you don't willingly pick up shit with your hands, but after it sits outside and gets inundated by the sun, the virus is probably attenuated greatly, if not destroyed. And so it wouldn't surprise me that actually outdoor defecation is nowhere near as serious as you might otherwise think it would be, which is kind of an interesting point, something to think about. But we'll see. I mean, that's we're nowhere near the end of the road on this. The other thing, though, is that you need to pay attention to these places, because the predictions were that all of these places were just going to get pounded, just terribly pounded. And now we are finding, hey, wait a minute, where is it? Okay, think about that for a minute. Where is it? Why hasn't it happened? And again, there's lessons in there in the epidemiology field that nobody wants to pay attention to. Why is transmission more inhibited there? And the truth is probably that transmission isn't so much that it's inhibited, it's that the transmission itself is quite efficient, but those people tend not to be obese, diabetic, hypertensive. How many really fat, outrageously fat people do you think are out there in India when you don't have any food? Wait a minute. This thing seems to have a problem in that it targets ACE2 receptors. It tends to be very nasty of people that are diabetic and otherwise are compromised, immune compromised, or obese. And interestingly enough, one of the things that I think is interesting is we're getting some information that one of the ways that it goes after people who are diabetic is it goes after the kidneys. Now, that makes some sense, because one of the things that happens with diabetes is that the blood sugar level, if yours is high, it does damage to the kidneys. And over time, you end up on dialysis. This is one of the ways that diabetes kills you, by the way, eventually. Dialysis is a nasty way to go, too. Boy, oh boy, you don't want to go that way. But the thing is that weakening of your system means that other parts of your body are less able to fight it off. So it's interesting that there's a link there, but there's people talking about that now that, hey, look, one of the things that ends up getting people, if they are diabetic and they get this, what actually ends up killing, everyone says it's COVID, and not so much. One of the things that apparently ends up getting them is renal failure. When you look at clinically what actually killed the guy, of course, they list everything. If you get shot, but you have COVID, they'll list that as a COVID death. Okay, it's just, hey, I know. We have to pump up the numbers, right? So are we going to see sanity out of anybody? No, probably not. Are we going to see a lot of pushback from people in trying to prevent this, people like Kemp from having success in Georgia? Well, yeah. What happens when the weekend passes, we get into next week? Remember, we're supposed to have this huge rush of cases next week, right, in Georgia, because we're opening parts of Georgia today. 5 days from now, you would expect that there would be a whole bunch of people that get sick. What's going to happen to the thesis when that doesn't occur? This is the nightmare for people like Trump and Fauci right now, is that you get somebody like Kemp who says, bite me, I'm opening up blah, 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 blah. He does a bunch of close contact places, hair salons, tattoo parlors, places where you inherently have to. Look, folks, you can't get a tattoo without the guy literally being, a foot away from you. All right, I mean, let's be realistic, right? It's the way it is. So we go ahead and we do those things, and there's no rush of cases. There's no massive disaster. And then what do? Yeah, there's something to think about, because that's coming. And then you look at what's going on in the market today. Yesterday not so good, because we had this this thing with Gilead. This morning it's up again, modestly so. It's funny that we're talking modestly so. Dow up 170 points in the futures. The S&P's up about 21, which is 0.75% thereabouts. That's about where we are with everything. And and the NAS is up maybe 0.5% or so on the futures there as well. And we'll see how this all plays out. But I think you're looking at the bloom coming off the rose with regards to some of these lockdowns. The other thing, though, is that when it comes down to it, folks, it really comes down to the people of this country. All right? If you are going to sit in your house scared of a virus when, like every other virus throughout history, they're inactivated and destroyed by sunlight, when you ought to be outside doing things outdoors. Okay? If you're willing to put up with your governors and your other people in your state that's, oh no, cower and hide under your desk, oh my God, for a disease that when you really get down to it, the number of people, and again, the serological surveys, folks, every single one that's been run so far has shown infection numbers with silent infections that are ridiculous multiples, 10 times or more. Sometimes, in some cases, 50 to 80 times. All right, but none of them less than an extra zero. All right, where every one of these surveys that's been run. I mean, and folks, we're not just talking about one. We got 2 in California now. We have the nursing home out near Boston. We have the MIT survey of fecal or viral shedding in poop, which revealed that a huge number of people, far more than had tested positive in the area where they ran the survey, had to have had the virus because they were actively shedding the virus. All of these surveys go the same direction. Now, you can say, well, but I got problems with the peer review of this, that, and the other. Okay, I give you that. I have no problem with that. And in fact, you're right. On an individual basis, none of these surveys are persuasive. The problem is that if they're wrong, they wouldn't all stack up on one side of the desk. Okay? You'd have some to go one way, some to go the other way, but that's not what's going on. They're all stacking up on the same side. So at that point, you have to stand up and say, all right, there's something to this. It's probably right. And the evidence is piling up in a major way on one side of the table, because that's what you have. So that's where we are for today, folks. Look, until the American people are willing to tell governors and mayors and cops, if necessary, bite me, we're opening our businesses, we're going to go back and we're going to go patronize them. And that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, too bad. You don't have enough jail cells. You don't have enough police. And if we have to stop you from trying to arrest somebody, we will. That's when the stupid ends. And if you're not willing to do it today, folks, believe me, if you think this is the last time this game's going to be run on you, you're wrong. If you think that Z and his pals and all the other crazies that are out there with regards to America and the world for that matter, you're wrong. You think this isn't going to have a dislocation type effect and really bad problems a month, 2 months, 6 months from now down the road with things like the food supply, energy, parts for critical infrastructure? You're wrong. Wake up, America. Time's short, and you're running out. I'm your ticker guy.